All right, here we go. She said I was going to be the moderator, but I feel more like the late night talk show host. On our big set.
Yeah, you got
We need a band and
yeah,
play the whole
I had to
intro.
go from wake up at Washburn to nighttime.
No, we're definitely switching it back. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the format. Typically at Wake Up with Washburn or Ichabods of Industry, we have people get up and make a presentation, and that's worked very well over the years. But I actually have a list of questions that I want to ask, and then you'll notice the large couch there. We have some other guests that we're going to bring up to kind of participate in this. And then if we get through all of that, then at the end we will have time for some question and answer from the audience. So I'm going to jump right in because we have more than 20 questions to ask today. And I just want to start with Washburn. It's been a special place for both of you. So maybe please begin by sharing the story of how you met on campus and how the beginning of this partnership and marriage formed.
How much time we got?
It's up to you.
Okay, all right. So I grew up in Topeka, and I went to school for first freshman and sophomore year in Oklahoma. I transferred to Oklahoma, but more about that later, to Washburn halfway through my sophomore year. And I intentionally put myself around people I wanted to be with, and that was, at the time, it was called BSU, Baptist Student Union. And so at the same time, this guy was already here at Washburn. He knew everybody knew him, but he didn't know me. And so John Sapp, at the time of that student organization leading up to Valentine's, would put this guy with this girl and this girl with this guy. He didn't know anybody. I mean, I didn't know anybody. Greg knew everybody. But I had his name, and he had some other girl's name. And the theory was you prayed and did things to that person for 3 weeks, and then on Valentine's was the big reveal. Except on Valentine's, I went back to Oklahoma. But, for Greg, I had fun. My sister Harmony and I, we Oreoed his car. We did all kinds of crazy things. She would make calls from the house to his fraternity house. He had no idea who this person was. And so my sister and I both had fun, playing 3 weeks against Greg. But we soon met after that. We were walking across campus. I had included a picture. The big reveal, as you might call it now, was Valentine's, but I wasn't there. And so, but we knew what each other looked like. And so we stopped. It's kind of midway between here and what used to be the science building. And we started talking, and Greg goes, "Hey, you want to go out for a pop sometime?" And I'm like, "That's what you said then?" I was like, "Sure." And then I didn't hear anything from him for like 2 or 3 weeks, right? I'm like, "Well, that was, that's done." And so then somehow we met up again, and Howard and Sharon Brenneman are here today, and Howard had taken Greg supposedly and his brothers on a ski trip. That's why I didn't hear back from him. But we got back around to seeing each other. We started dating. I got engaged our junior year, and we got married 3 weeks after we graduated. So we met 43 years ago, and we've been married for 41.
I think that that sounds like a really romantic thing to do, that secret saint thing. You do something for somebody for 3 weeks. I would tell you the guys had it much better than the girls, because Ron would write these amazing candygrams and do all that. I can't honestly remember one thing I did for that poor girl.
Yeah.
I'm sure I did something, but it was not nearly as elaborate as that.
But I will say, I think it was the second date.
We met right by the bell tower.
Yeah, the second date we're out on Topeka Boulevard at some pizza place. And Greg looked at me and he goes, "Hey, so what are your life plans?" And in my brain, I'm like, "I don't even know you." And he has like a yellow paper on the table already. I'm like, "Oh my God." So he's always been this way. So, thank you.
All right. Okay, so after Washburn, Greg, you went off to Harvard Business School to earn your MBA. How did Washburn prepare you for your MBA at Harvard?
Yeah, Washburn was a great prep. Dr. Gary Baker is here. Gary, I don't know where you're sitting, but if you could stand up, it would be great. I had 3 professors that were, he's in the back. I had 3 professors that were incredibly meaningful to me during my time at Washburn. 2 of them actually had a side hustle, a business they ran out of their office, and I learned more watching them run that actuary business, and that was Dr. Baker and Dr. Eck. And I just learned so much in finance from the 2 of them. And then the third one was Dr. James, Walt James. And Walt was a mean SOB. Many of you know Walt. When you were in school. And then at the end, after you graduated, he turned into the biggest teddy bear you'd ever met. And I probably spoke 50 times in the state of Kansas, and that's not an exaggeration. And Walt was at every one. One time we were with the family in the Ozarks, and Walt found us. Walt and Nancy, you know, for many of us were, and I know for Dr. Mazurek too, were just instrumental in their career. So between the sort of, you were taught by real professors, and you really were learned real things. So by the time I got to Harvard, I had all these Ivy League folks around me, but I ended up tutoring them in a lot of accounting and finance topics because they were all philosophy majors. Oh. So when we had kids, we had a saying that we could have philosophy minors, but you had to major in getting a job. But that kind of came from some of the lessons I learned here at Washburn. But Washburn prepared me incredibly well, and that preparation has continued to just benefit both of us through our whole lives. It's a big difference here, and some of you take that for granted, but those of you who have been at bigger schools and have had grad assistants and grad students teach you, that doesn't happen here. So we're very blessed.
Yeah, great answer. And I know there are a lot of Walt James fans in the audience today. Rhonda, you went on to be a teacher. What was your favorite part about teaching young children?
Yeah, my dream student that I wanted was the sweet 3rd and 4th grade student because they still love their teachers, and that was my goal. I got placed in the hormonally imbalanced 12, 13, and 14-year-old arena, but I quickly adjusted. So I taught in Kansas City, and for me, teaching was, I realized, especially at that age, that their little lives are so unstable anyway, just in their bodies. And then they have their parents talking into them, they don't like their parents, and so teachers talking, and they don't like their teachers. But my aspiration was to be a stable force for these kids and also along the way to learn. But it was, teaching doesn't just end in the classroom, and so it's continued on, through our own kids, and then I was able to really pour into a lot of our own children's education at the school they went to. People would say, "Do you work here?" I'm like, "Yeah, but I don't pull a check. I don't get a salary." So I've been able to use the foundation that Washburn gave me as a teacher all through life.
Okay, excellent. And then similarly, Greg, as you've moved through these large corporations that we saw in the introductory video, what was one of the greatest challenges that you faced? And then on the other hand, tell us one of the greatest business accomplishments from your career.
Yeah, I think the greatest challenge, and one of the things that took me a long time to learn was how to manage your work and your life. Because I would get pretty engrossed, Ronda's smiling. I would get pretty engrossed, in what I was doing, and some of it just took a lot of time and consumed a lot of time, and it was really, trying to figure out from a family perspective, kind of how to make it work. I do have a few family members here today. I should introduce. My mom and dad are here. They're kind of in the front row here, and they were so instrumental in my life. I so appreciate what they gave me. My dad spoke here 43 years ago. He was running Eston Corporation, a farm equipment manufacturer. And we were just comparing notes on that. Man, that was a long time ago, but he spoke over in Henderson, and it looks the same now as it did then. Thank goodness. We're having some redo of that, but it was so instrumental in that. And then we have one of our 3 kids here. Our daughter Bethany is up here as well, and she's our rose between 2 thorns. So the whole extended family was very kind to me during that time where I kind of, focused maybe a little bit too hard on work. And then, I think success is so much a team sport. And we all stand on the shoulders of giants, and it was so much a team sport. I really did enjoy each one of the business opportunities I had. Continental was the first, and I became president at the age of 32, so I was very young. And before that, I was at Bain and made partner at Bain very young. So I was fortunate to have started my career pretty young, and then through the ups and downs, managed to have some reasonable luck at business and success at business. And I wouldn't pull out any kind of one thing. The thing I probably enjoyed the most, I enjoyed being with the frontline folks. So for me at Continental, that was the pilots and the flight attendants and mechanics and the gate agents, and kind of thinking of different incentives that you can kind of put in place for them. So we put in place this on-time bonus at Continental, because we were the 10th place airline out of 10, you saw in the video. The reason actually the DOT tracks on time is because Continental was so bad. That's a true story. They started tracking it for that. And so we put in place this incentive where every time we were in first place, every employee got $100. And every time we were in second and third, they got $65. And it would say, thank you for helping us be on time, Gordon and Greg, working with you and I were running the airline. Now, I'll never forget what a high it was when that first check went out. And I got this call from a flight attendant, and she said, do you know what $65 is to me? She was crying. And I said, no. She said, nobody ever gives us anything. I took my kids to the cereal aisle of the grocery store and told them to buy all the sugar-coated cereal they want. And a mechanic calls me, and he said, you know what $65 is to me? And I said, no. And he says, it's 2 beers and a table dance, you know. But we went from last place to first place in 2 months, and we were never out of first place again. And it was just kind of aligning those. I really enjoy, whether it's Burger King or even what I do now, trying to find ways that you can really, it's not always financial, sometimes it's just gratitude that you can actually say thank you and pay it forward. And fortunately, I'm the lead director at Home Depot. I chair that board. I have been on the board for 25 years, and I get to do that all the time in Home Depot stores. So it's that's probably success to me is seeing others be successful and do well is probably the biggest reward.
Okay, that's probably why you've been so successful. Education has been important to both of you. And one of the areas that you invested in early on at Washburn was a professorship in the School of Business. And so for this next section, we'd like to bring up Dr. Norma Juma, the Brenneman Professor of Business Management. Norma, would you please come up? Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Yeah. And we're actually going to start with a question for Greg and Ronda. So share why, whoever wants to answer it, why you chose to start this professorship at Washburn.
It was really interesting. Julie and I, Dr. Mazurek and I were comparing notes, President Mazurek. How do I do that? I mean, I'm seriously calling her Julie. But she was dean of the College of Business at the time. And we had actually put a student scholarship program together because we thought, let's have scholarships for students. And then she actually contacted us and said, hey, 2 things. It would be really impactful for the professors to be able to have some resources where they could research, do travel, maybe they don't have to teach during the summer because they have just a little bit of extra margin, if you will. And she told me a bunch. I did not know this. It was the first business school professorship that was in the school of business. That was 1999, I was told at lunch. I've been to a lot of lunch. I forgot all this stuff. And at the time, the state of Kansas had this incredible program where they would provide matching funds. So if you gave to that, you could get a match on your funds, and that would create the professorship. So it was partially, Julie's really good salesmanship, and it was partially, and I think she's had every job at the university. But I'm sure she worked in the kitchen at one point. But it was partially economic. It was just such a great deal the state had put together to make it possible. And we've only had 2 in that whole time since '99. Two Brenneman professors of business strategy, and we're just so thrilled you're doing this. And you've been here for a long time, right?
For 20 years.
20 years, and had such an amazing impact on so many students.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Dr. Juma, talk about the impact of the professorship and what your research does to enhance the classroom learning.
Thank you so much for that question. And I would like to address it from School of Business Strategy. So the School of Business is an accredited program. We are evaluated on 3 things: teaching, research, and service. And we have a total of 6 professorships in the School of Business currently. And each of these professorships contribute to the mission and 3 facets of our program. So for instance, Professor Jim Martin is responsible for industry relations. He facilitates internship, final placement with a student. He's our industry ambassador. Then we have Stoiker, Professor Michael Stoiker, who is responsible for our international programs, trying to bring the world to Washburn, so to speak, creating these international collaborations with different schools around the globe, responsible for taking students for study programs, etc. And then comes my professorship. Mine is focused on research. And so every 3 years, I'm expected to publish a number of articles in the lead journals. And that is the primary component of my professorship. All these things that we do are the greatest beneficiary in our students. They get to experience cutting-edge research that we bring to the classroom. They get to travel the world in a way that would not be possible otherwise. We get to create collaborations and a presence in the industry through professorships like Jim Martin's. So in a nutshell, that's what my professorship means and the professorships in the School of Business.
Okay. And I understand, speaking of the travel, you just got back from Kenya. So why don't you tell us just a little bit about that trip and what you were doing there?
Right, so that is a wonderful example of how our professorships work in the School of Business. So Professor Michael Stark and I just came back from Kenya. We went on a dual mission. Professor Michael Stoiker was prospecting for study abroad opportunities for our students. So we visited a couple of schools. We looked at various programs. But I, on the other hand, I was collecting data for a second phase of a study that I'm working with a couple of professors from Georgia State, the Georgia Institute of Technology and Rochester Institute of Technology. So the professorship, it means a lot. It allows me to collaborate with scholars, lead scholars in my field. And something that I also wanted to mention, talking about the power of the professorship. There is an article that is coming out in TK magazine in March that I authored. That's a beautiful article to read to understand what we do and what things like professorship help us to do. So in that article, I talk a little bit more about the technology, AI, how we use it in higher education, its impact in society, and how we are preparing our students for that future.
Okay, excellent. I've gotten to know you both over the years, and every time I talk to you, you're in a different location. So I was wondering if you could just kind of share, in a nutshell, a year of Brenneman travel.
That's exhausting. But
I
I will
agree.
say, I saw that question ahead of time. And travel began for me in Topeka, Kansas, getting in the back of a station wagon and driving 12 hours north to northern Illinois, and then going to southern Arkansas. So that was my first exposure to travel. Then it was Kansas City. Then it was Boston and Dallas. And with this guy, it literally has been all over the world. So when Greg was being an accountant in Kansas City, he was driving. Every week he was gone. So that began he was gone. And then when he got into consulting.
When we were married 30 years, Ronda said to me, it's been the best 3 years of my life.
together. And so Greg's always been gone. And so you're going to make it or break it. And we did great with that because it's okay if he's not, but it's okay if he comes back. So we've always been traveling. We've always had bags that are packed and going. And then our kids came along, and then with Continental Airlines, that kind of opened up the entire world, right? Since Greg is working in so many places, we're just going on the planes with them. And early on, they learned if you can't carry it, you can't take it. So these little Munchkin kids had little pool bags. That was it. There was no check bags because Greg told us we're not checking bags. And travel. just why travel? So I remember there was a trip in Bolivia, we were with World Vision, and Andrew, our oldest, was about 17, and this little Quechuan Indian lady, there was a program to teach knitting so they could sell products to bring money into their home. And Andrew was, tall at that time for a teenager, and this little lady comes up and she's putting this hat on his head, and Andrew's like, I can't take that hat. I'm like, you gotta take the hat. Because, they were seeing that the importance of giving and receiving, but they had learned in this culture that there wasn't any money, there was nothing. And so for this lady to give this gift to Andrew it was wonderful to say, from a parent perspective, to see the impact on the child of a teenager who, he's comfortable in his own little bubble where he lives, and that is the importance of travel. We've just had the great opportunity to do it, and a lot of it connected to work.
Yeah, and I will say, they live in Texas. I would say the number of times that I've called them and they've been in Texas, I could probably count on one hand. You're always on the go.
I just want to make one comment of what Dr. Juma said, that Jim Martin is here, I think, today as well, and you may raise your hand. It was over there, and I was at a funeral for my aunt, my dad's sister, this weekend, and one of my cousin's sons, Brent Brenneman, went through here. So we were comparing notes. On Monday, he took the last section of the CPA exam. So same sort of program, 40 some odd years later. And, we were talking, and he said, I got to tell you about somebody that really mentored me and made a massive difference in my career. And it was Dr. Martin. So I met him for the first time here, and I told him, I was so glad to know there's another Walt James in accounting that is really grabbing these kids and making a massive difference. So thank you for that, and Dr. Pugh, I know the same applies to you, but I just thought it was a cool story.
Yeah.
It is Washburn.
It is.
Yep.
Yes.
It's a great story.
So along those lines, Dr. Juma, what do you think the professorship, what impact do you think that can have on students going into the future?
Tremendous. So I can't imagine us accomplishing our mission as the School of Business without these professorships. When you think about creating a study abroad program, we have to prospect, we have to formulate these relationships before we implement a study abroad program. That requires substantial amounts of investment, which students will not be able to do. And that's what Michael was doing with a trip to Kenya. When you think about what it requires to publish in the elite journals, collecting the data, formulating and collaborating with scholars in the School of Business, as well as across the other campuses, and all that goes towards producing this final offering, those would not be possible without the generous support of the professorship, all the resources that we get from the other support within the Washburn pool of resources. And so when you talk about the impact we're doing on our students in our university, our mission, and preparing these students for our increasingly dynamic and complex world, it's just not possible. And I just want to say a big thank you to Greg and Ronda. You make a huge difference, and you're helping us accomplish the mission that we set out.
Awesome. Okay, let's give Dr. Juma a round of applause. Thank you. All right, we'll move into the next section here. At the end of the video that we played for your introduction, it ends with the words, I want my life to matter. Do you want your life to matter too? Which was a provocative question. Rhonda, tell us about you and Greg's philanthropic journey and what some of your successes and challenges have been.
I would start from my own upbringing. One of the first examples I had of giving was every Sunday my dad turned over this white envelope that at the time he took to church. He put some money in that envelope, sealed it, never know how much went in. But every Sunday, he dutifully carried that to church. That was my first example of philanthropy, of seeing somebody in action. Mom and Dad were always giving up their time and money and efforts. When I was a young adult, I would turn over my paycheck. Greg knows where this is going. I'd turn over the paycheck and go 10%, gas, school, whatever was left is what I lived on. So that's just how I've always kind of, that was my beginning. When Greg and I were together, he was like, no, we're not doing that way. He's more of a big picture guy. So he waits for a bigger kind of event. And so we had to find our own, how were we going to get giving? And each of us have their own vision, but then together as a couple that we found that. So we've always been very careful to those entities that we give. Greg's very good at this, looking under the hood to see if that organization is doing what they say they're doing. And so that's kind of been one of the trademarks, and Marshall would know this, and Dr. Bazik, they're like, oh no. And so that I would say would be one of the hallmarks of it, is just because we want those organizations to have success with the monies that they're given.
Yeah, and it makes the gifts we do receive that much more of a compliment, knowing what careful investors you are. So you focus immensely on the importance of marriage and family. And I've heard you talk a few times over the years about how you make your philanthropic decisions on Christmas morning. So I was wondering if you could describe that to our group today.
Yeah, no, we've done this for now, I guess, maybe close to 25 years. But our Christmas morning is the same every morning. We're, generally in Colorado, in Beaver Creek. We have a place out there. With our kids and now grandkids, and we get up and now with grandkids it's all fun again because they're just dying to get the presents. But we do the Christmas story, we do a few presents, and then we have some brunch, and then we spend the rest of the day going through and allocating the resources that we're going to give that year
As a family.
As a family, and each of our children, and we have one here, Bethany's here. Today, and then maybe we can tell a story of kind of how we started this. But each of our children have charities that they support and are responsible for, as do we. So we all come collectively together and we share those. And they come in and have a presentation, essentially. Here's what we asked them to do. Here's what they did, And we have 22 charities that have accumulated over time, some larger than others, obviously, that we support. But we now imposed a rule that if you want to add one, you have to take one away, and it can't be one of your siblings. And so, so that actually, leveled the playing field. But the way this started, and I'm going to turn this story over to Ronda. We started with ledgers and debits and credits. I mean, I was an accountant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm
back in the day. And
Yep.
so we started when they were really young, like 3, 4, 5 years old. And so I'm going to let you tell the debits and credits story and the ledger story.
I will do that.
Take
I
it
want
story.
to tell one Christmas morning as we were kind of teaching this concept to our kids. And so Aaron, our youngest, who's not here today, he's a full-fledged adult right now. He wasn't then.
You started too.
Yeah, I think he was going to the 8th grade, so their dad's telling him, I need a presentation, blah, 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 so they're like, oh, and so Aaron's at the table, and Aaron, well, I need a presentation, so he opens up his laptop, and we're kind of like, wow. And he went through this whole presentation, and he wanted the family to give money to AA Audio. Aaron, A-A-R-O-N, Audio. And we're like, great presentation. We'll work on that later. So some of that's just learning. So as parents, like my dad taught me, you have an opportunity to teach and to learn. So that's just, there's so many, we could go on and on, but that's just that one. So now I go to giving, or to
ledgers.
To the ledgers, right. So parenting, still waiting on my manual on how to parent, still haven't received it. But what I did learn in parenting is you steal other ideas, and then they become your ideas. And so one idea that I stole was from a friend of ours that, and with their children, they gave them each a ledger. Now we're talking paper, for those of you who don't know what a ledger is with paper, but and pencil. But in order to teach money, we kind of figured you had to get money into the hand of the individual who's going to learn about money. And so we came up with a list of go pick weeds for 30 minutes, and here's a quarter. Cinderella is here today. Bad Mouth Folklore says she never picked the weeds and she rarely got the quarter. But anyway, I digress. So anyway, if she got the quarter, it would go into the journal and it would say weed picking plus 25. if grandma sent money, grandma and grandpa sent money, it might say gift $20. And so we were trying to get money into their hands. We were the banker. I basically brought in the money. It was in their handwriting. I've got 2 of the ledgers still, so it's historical now.
Yes.
And so, but then they had to, once they had money, they had to learn to spend their money. So prior to this point, whenever we were on one of these crazy trips, I always would buy a trip toy. Well, as you're trying to teach kids money, I remember one time with Bethany, I think we were in Hawaii, and she's like, Mom, look at this toy, it's amazing, it's a doll, something. I'm like, that's great. She goes, aren't you gonna buy it? I'm like, I don't really want the doll. Do you wanna spend your money on the doll? And I just remember that face was like, what has happened here? And so she was not a spender, so she would never buy, so she would just accumulate money. Another child we had would willingly spend $30 for a piece of plastic that would break in moments. So you really have to figure out the individual child. But as we would lead up to Sundays, Greg would be there with the kids and the ledger would open, and however much money had come in, that money they would do the 10%, and then we would then give that money to them in their hands that they would then take to give. So it was just a very hands-on experience. Dare I go into discipline?
Yeah, you should, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to ask permission. Again, Bethany's here, she's our fall guy today. So one of our favorite stories with Bethany is, there's so many favorite stories, but she was a mouthy child. Okay, mouthy. So we're sitting at the breakfast counter, we got you ready for school. Bethany, you need to put your shoes on. I have to put my shoes on. This is where people might disagree with me. Minus 50 cents. Mouth. Just put your shoes on. I don't want to put my shoes on. Bethany, minus 50 cents. I mean, she didn't care. It was a game, but I wedged the journal as a tool of discipline. Everything my dad taught me, everything cost something, right? So that was money in, money out. So they were learning as they had this ledger. And then when they got to be like 15, 16, then we would take whatever the balance was, and that's when they got a checking account, as was known then. So then they had transitioned to the journal process to their actually being.
The best story though is I came home from work one day and I looked at inside of Bethany's ledger and it said minus $50 and it just said mouth. and I later learned that went $5, $10, $15, and
I mean, you gotta do what you gotta do. I mean, she turned out okay.
and she would say it was worth it. So
Well, let's find out.
What?
We equipped her with microphones. So Bethany, what was it like living in this environment?
Oh,
That's a great question. It was good. I think it really taught the value of money from a young age. I would say it was worth it to be sassy, and that was money very well spent to me. But
value of money.
I do think it was good to attach the value of not, when you're buying something, you're not just, that money's just not coming from nowhere. You have to pay for it. And then I think as an adult, it just makes you value the cost of things more. None of my friends know what a ledger is, even when I try to describe it to them. But I do think it was a good first initial lesson in debits and credits, and that turns into bigger amounts as you grow up.
Okay.
I do have another story in parenting with money, because you never know what you're doing with your children as parents. Is it working, right? You don't know. So Andrew, our oldest, is off at college, went to Baylor, and I'm just at home going through mail, just at Brenneman, opening mail. There's an envelope, I ripped it open, I went to look at it, and it said Andrew Brenneman. I'm like, oh, that's not mine. Oh, well, I'll read it anyway. And so what it was, I'm like, wait, Andrew, that's a church where he was going to school. And then I read it more, and then it was like his annual giving report that they had sent for him. And I was like, I called Greg wherever he was in the world. Greg, you're not going to believe this. Andrew has actually been, one, attending church, and two, he's been giving. And so that was an example of something did work. And so we
he
could see
had
that
to attend church.
transition.
That was in his college contract, but he wanted to stay funded.
That's another topic.
Yeah, another
Sometimes
topic.
it works.
But to kind of bring it back to Washburn a little bit, Marshall, one of the things we've appreciated about Washburn on the other side, other than being a student, is the money here is managed so very well. The university operates in surplus, and not every place can say that. So it really does, it is managed well. And we've seen this over time. And we're so excited about what President Mazurchak and what you are doing, and what the whole team here is doing. Washburn's the fastest growing school now in the state of Kansas. Freshman class is up 23%.
Right.
I mean, it's incredible. And not just at the freshman level, but the overall university is really excelling. But we've seen the execution even on the programs we've worked with, whether it's professorship or whether it's the Brenneman Fellows program. The execution of actually fairly hard things to get right for universities are not known for getting lots of stuff right. Washburn's done a good job of that. I think Washburn's also done a good job of hitting the middle of the fairway on all the social issues that batter through the world during the day, not getting caught up in the moment in terms of where those are. And I think there's huge value to that if you're looking at an organization and how they manage money. Because if you're thinking about giving money somewhere, one of the things you feel an obligation of stewardship to do is make sure it's managed well.
Yeah.
So you've done, you at Washburn have done just a fabulous job.
Thank you. Well, we definitely trust your judgment, and we know that you look closely. And I do have just one story to share about what it's like being one of the 22 charities on the other side of Christmas morning. It involves me checking my email on December 26th and 27th. Is there anything from the Brennemans? Yeah, so that's been fun over the years. So we're going to shift gears now and talk a little bit about the Brenneman Leadership Series. And we've been using your book, Right Away and All at Once, which we have a copy of here on stage, during the Brenneman Leadership Series that you all both established. So I'd like to ask Jeff Mott, who leads the series, to come up on stage and spend some time with us. Welcome, Jeff.
I told Jeff he's the voice of calmness.
He is.
Jeff's amazing.
Agreed. Okay, so Jeff, why don't you start off by just explaining a little bit about the premise of the Leadership Series and kind of what takes place at a high level.
Yeah, so, well, the premise is we're working through Greg's book. And when I got the phone call 6 years ago now, I think, to see if I'd be interested in doing this, first thing I did is I picked up the book and started looking at the book. And
To see if it was legit.
yeah, absolutely. And what I realized was on both the business side, but also on the life side, the things that are talked about in the book, is how much it was me, how much it resonated with me. And if you listen to Greg and Ronda talk about it, that's such a common experience to go through, you know, to have successes in life and then but to realize my life feels empty, and go through that process of thinking through what that means and how you progress through that part of life. And so so I was all in. This is great. I felt like it was, you know, my big brother writing this, and it was great. And so it's really, the book goes through, and it's got the business half of the chapters, and it's got the life half of the chapters. And what's really cool about that is we work through both the business part and the life part, and to watch the students talk about those independently, but then also bring them forward in an integrated way, and to understand how they can bring business into their life and how they can bring their life into their business. In the event that faith is important to them, and how that plays into all that as well. Rick talks about that in the book quite a bit. And it's really to help them as they graduate and move into the next stage of their life to be more prepared and to have the things learned in leaving college that maybe Greg and myself didn't quite have yet.
Okay. Greg and Rhonda, why did you decide to start this program at Washburn?
Mentoring has always been very important to us, and we do that, you know, in a lot of different ways. But we thought Washburn would be the perfect place to try this. So just to kind of level set for those of you who have not been in this cohort or in this class that Jeff teaches. By the way, Jeff and Julie and Amanda and Marshall and President Mazurchak have all taught pieces of this. Jeff's the lead teacher, and they do an unbelievable job. It's what I mean by executing well, right? It's fairly rare. But the students go through, and you'll hear from some of them in a second, but they go through and they prepare a life plan. And then they prepare a budget, and for many of them, it's the first time they've ever thought about what is really important to me that I get on one piece of paper, and thought about budgeting. We learned that in high school when I was 100 years ago when we were in school, but it's not taught in high school anymore. And then they have a stipend, many of which have actually put that stipend to get a Roth IRA to start their retirement, and Jeff started them on that, which I thought was fun. I hadn't even thought about that. That was phenomenal. And then the class also has a generosity component to it, where they're each cohort, 4 cohorts a year of 20 kids per cohort, so 80 kids a year, are given some money as a cohort to allocate to charities. And they do an evaluation of charities both inside Washburn and in the Topeka community, and they have the most amazing thought process and award process, and it's Washburn out to the community, which is kind of unusual for a university. It's usually, would you just send me some money? There's not often a, like, let me go out and do that, which is really cool. And then they put together kind of a personal board of directors, people that can kind of help them do it. And Jeff, as a leader, it leads them through that process. But, as I kind of thought about that, and Ronda and I, come in either by Zoom or in person for the last class, and just to see the life change that happens and what you've created in terms of just a connectivity. And what's really cool about this is it's all majors. It's traditional students right out of high school all the way through mid-career folks that have come back. It's all nationalities, ethnicities. It's the most diverse class. We've got a lot of the athletes through. It's the most diverse class I probably think I've seen anywhere. And so that's kind of why. I mean, it just, it felt like a way to create a eulogy of virtue. And without you guys, though, we would have never been able to do that, right? So we really are appreciative of that. I don't know about you.
The fact that an individual sign up for this thing that they don't know about, to me, is always very humbling. So we've asked, why did you get in this? And usually it's word of mouth. So that's the first thing that's very impactful to me, that somebody would take that. It's an evening usually where they're investing their time. And then also that just to see the learning that happens over the course of time, especially finances. Many people have never even heard about it. And I don't know how you teach money with a swipe. I'm still kind of, the digital money thing is different than here's your quarter, here's your dollar. So I think it's vitally important to talk about money. And what Greg has done in his book so well is he could write a book easily for only the highest minds of business. I am not that. So when he wrote the book, it's like, who do you want your audience to be? And he wanted it broader, so I was the dummy side and got it so everybody could understand it. But so it's enabled for anybody, whether you're a business major or not. And so I think that's very appealing to people because they're kind of surprised by the concept that somebody who's had a career in business can write a book that is like personally effective from financial and how you engage with people around you. And so it's intriguing to watch, so thank you for what he's done.
Thank you for that. Yeah. So Jeff, you have taught leadership for a number of years. What to you is the best part of walking the students through creating their 5-step plan?
So what I just love about it is we do so many things there that I think as you move later on in your career, you forget about. And I'm hoping that they take that with them and don't forget about it. And the first week we get together, we get 20 or so students that come in the room, don't know anybody, maybe they know 1 or 2 other students. And by week 2 or 3, they're the most vulnerable, transparent group that you would imagine, because they're learning from each other. We start out with the activities the first week, where it's them developing the norms of the program. What's the learning environment they want to have together? Because every group of people that come together randomly is going to be very different group. And so what culture do they want? What learning experience do they want? What do they expect of each other? And what are they going to hold each other accountable to? We go through that activity, and it's amazing how it brings them together, where they walk in the first day and no one's talking to each other. And by the second week, it feels like they've known each other for weeks or months. That I think is, for me, very inspiring. Because at some point in our lives, we forget that. And I don't know why. As kids, we're totally vulnerable to say anything. But we get to, into the world, and everything, starts to become more guarded. And it's amazing how the learning experience, if you can make it other-centered versus just, I'm gonna go learn this and think about it just myself, how much more valuable and rich it is. And so, that's, for me, the most rewarding part to watch over that period of time in the program.
Okay. Ronda, as you've met the students and you've heard about what they've chosen to give money to, because there is this philanthropy track kind of running parallel with the book study, what have been your thoughts and what have you been most proud of regarding their selections?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting how it's evolved. I think Greg and I thought the philanthropy would be just like outside the community of Washburn. And what's happened is there is campus giving to organizations on campus and organizations off campus. And having grown up in Topeka, I could name so many of them. I'm like, I know that one, I know the Capra Mountain. It's just amazing that these students are challenged with looking at an organization and as a group deciding, we have this money, how are we going to give it? And to me, it's just phenomenal. And then some of them go on to they can give money, but they might give their time to that organization, which is just as important as money. One thing that has really humbled me as a student is the organizations on campus that the students choose to give. So BODS, the students are taking care of the students. And I think in this day and age, I would say back in the day of college attendance, there wasn't so much of that. It was just like you were on your track doing what you were doing. So it's very encouraging to me that it's not just out in the community, it's not just on the campus. So I think we've both been just really excited about the opportunity. One, that somebody learns about everybody can give something. It doesn't matter the amount, because we all have something to give, time, money, and efforts. And then also to see these 18 to 25-year-olds, if you will, learning that they have something to give, and what am I going to do going forward?
Excellent. All right, well, let's thank Jeff and then bring up a couple of our students. All right, so we have Blythe Landon, who graduated in 2022, and Patrick Alterner, who graduated in 2023 and 2024, and they both participated in the Brenneman Leadership Series and have some great experience, and let's welcome them up. Do you recognize each other from Zoom or in person?
Yeah.
For both? Okay, great.
Right before.
It wasn't COVID here.
Yeah, okay, we're going to start with Blythe. Let you go first. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you decided to do the program when you were a student?
Absolutely, yeah. So my name is Blythe, and I am currently graduated in 22 with my degree in marketing and international business. I am currently working at Advisors Excel, so I do recruiting and onboarding. One of the things I've been really passionate about there is the intern program that we do and the programming that we begin to offer for the interns and building that connection with Washburn to keep on bringing on amazing students onto our team and give them the opportunity to get some of that real world and hands-on experience. So that's been a really unique portion of my job to kind of stay connected with Washburn. When I was invited to or got the email about the Brenneman series, I was really excited because as a student, you're trying to figure everything out. You have no idea what you're doing. You're faced with these kind of three key questions, and it's like, who am I, who are my people, and what do I do next? And the opportunity to be part of the Brenneman series was a really neat way to help answer each of those questions. Because the book, with both the business and the life aspect of it, really forced you to kind of look internally and understand, like, what are my priorities, and do I believe some of the things I was raised with, or do I need to shift some of those philosophies? And then you sit at a table with that amazing, diverse group of students, and you may not have everything in common, but you do have this like-mindedness that you want to learn and you want to do better and you want to think about some of those things. And then, so I found kind of a little bit more about who I was, who my people were, and then the Go Forward plan was a really great way to shape the question of, gosh, what do I do when I don't have classes to keep me organized, right? When I don't have professors assigning things, what's next after that? It was a really, really formative part of my experience at Washburn.
Okay, excellent. And then Patrick, same question for you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and then why you chose to do the Brenneman series. Okay.
Hello everyone, my name is Patrick Altenor, and funnily enough, about a year ago, I was on the other side, sitting here as a student, and it's very surreal to be up here right now, a year later. So I was at Washburn from 2019 to 2024, graduated 23 with a degree in finance and economics, and then with my MBA last May. During my time at Washburn, I was on the football team, and I was heavily involved with clubs and in the community. Professionally, I did 4 internships at my time at Washburn, so very busy during the summers. And then during my MBA, I was actually an economic advisor at the Greater Topeka Partnership, so I was heavily involved in the community as well. The Brenneman Series was actually exposed to me from a football coach my freshman year. And we walked into a meeting and he started handing out these flyers. And he was like, hey guys, scholarship, you read a book and you get a scholarship. I took the paper and I was intrigued. I started reading it, and I think at the time either get to be a sophomore or maybe I missed the deadline, who knows. But penciled it in, and the next year I got an email saying that they were accepting applications for the Brenneman Series again. So emailed it to my best friend, said, hey man, we have to do this together. And we both applied and became fellows. And we may have gotten in for, childish reasons at the time, but we had no idea how impactful it was going to be for both of us. And it really shaped us, and I would say accelerated both of our careers.
This was back when I was still teaching, so you need to give a shout out to your best friend.
Yeah, shout out Cuba. He's out there somewhere.
Oh, he is?
Yeah.
I thought you were
Where
going
are you working now, Patrick? Tell me where.
I am the finance manager at Procter & Gamble. I work in the sports partnership group, so I get to do a lot of cool things with the NFL, Olympics, and MLS, which is perfect for me considering my history with sports at Washburn.
Great. Blythe, what was your biggest takeaway from the program?
There were so many, so that's a hard one. I will say the Go Forward plan was really, really impactful in not only my personal life. I've definitely used it there. I joke that one of the big things I took away from corporate America is like the performance management meetings where I sit down and have a performance review with myself. And I'm like, how have we been doing? We haven't been up to our standards. So I like to take that away. But the Go Forward plan is just such it's not easy, but it is simple. And I love that aspect of it. I hope I don't get into any copyright infringement issues here, but I use it in my day-to-day at work. I do. I recently gave a presentation, recommending a project, and I had done this, research and gathered these statistics, and I had all my reasons and my answers. And then at the end of it, everybody was like, okay, but we're on board. What do we do? And I go, thank you so much for asking. I have a Go Forward plan. And I literally called it that in my slideshow, and it had just gotten so weirdly ingrained in my everyday vernacular just from this series and from reading that book that it was just really impactful. I've seen it in my day-to-day with my coworkers that every time you want to make a change or start a new project, it's so easy to get into the weeds or bogged down in the details, and then you kind of just talk yourself out of making the change. Being able to simplify a complex project or task and make it manageable, make it exciting for the people again, because if you can fit it on one page, how hard could it be, right? And so I've used that just every single day in my life. And I will say the other big takeaway, and this wasn't so much a lesson as just a real gift of the program, my relationship with Jeff through this program and his instruction and his mentorship, he just became a really big part of my life. He's still a good friend and mentor to this day, so I'm really grateful that we got to make that connection as well.
Great. Patrick, as you transitioned out of college, how did you build your own processes and plans on how to manage money?
Okay. So in the Brenneman series, we actually do an exercise where you create your own budget based off your income at the time. And we're all college students, so it's not much at that time. But you project your income, and you also do a budget based off that. As a freshman coming into college, I fell in love with personal finance, so this was actually an opportunity for me to create a budget for the first time, which I'd already been interested in doing. And as I grew older, I actually have continued doing that. And now I do a monthly budget tracker where I check in on my monthly status on all my accounts and ensure that it's aiming upward, not downward. So that's how I've handled my finances personally, and the Brenneman series is truly impactful for me, starting that process and continuing it to this day.
All right, and then a question for both of you. You can decide who goes first. What was your biggest takeaway on supporting philanthropic causes, either through volunteering or financially from the series?
Yeah, I'll go and take that one. One of my biggest takeaways was the concept that we both talked about a lot and practiced in the course, which was the due diligence, right? Like, even just with the monetary giving, there was a lot of research required and talking to people and understanding where the money actually goes and what impact it has and what the needs are of the organization. Just taking the time to kind of do that research and understand what your giving really means, you know, instead of just kind of writing a check and moving on with your life. And I really enjoyed that piece of it. I also found that there was a crossover in the volunteering side of it, because due diligence in volunteering really involves more relationship building. It involves spending time with the people or the organization that you're supporting, and then it becomes kind of this two-way street of the help both ways, of understanding and giving and just being able to participate in that. So kind of that due diligence piece is something I still very much take with me. I kind of actually adopted both Greg and Ronda's understanding of giving, where sometimes it's got to be very intentional. You have to carve it out of your budget, and you write that 10% or whatever first thing, and then sometimes it's the one-off and the where can we make an impact with maybe some of the extra that we have. I love at the beginning of your book, or I think the chapter on the Go Forward plan, Greg, you called out and you said, I imagine most of the people reading this book fall into the crowd of being privileged. And then you kind of talk about that, and you're like, it's our duty to choose to be dangerous by living a life of significance. And I think about that often when I have opportunities either to volunteer or to give, and that really guides the way that I prioritize it. So I really appreciate that aspect of your story.
And just to build on that, a second, the vetting the charities that you are going to donate to makes it that more impactful, and you're more careful with the dollars, and it really becomes more wholesome to you when you know that your dollars are actually going to have an impact. On the volunteering side, I also find tremendous value in volunteering. I find a different kind of joy when I'm actually serving myself. So in my life currently, I both volunteer and donate money, because I think that it's invaluable to do both. And when you actually serve someone with your time and your physical efforts, it's really impactful to me as a person.
Okay. We do have a little bit of time. Do you want to ask them a question, or do we want to turn it over to the audience for questions?
I just say I'm so proud of you guys. Like you actually, you stayed and helped other students for 2 more semesters, right?
So I was a fellow just for the one semester, but I've come back for different Washburn.
Yeah, I've seen you, either on Zoom or in person.
Yeah.
We've seen you, and Patrick, it was so impactful meeting you, and we had a bunch of football players with
Yeah, that was
there.
fun.
Yeah, it was great.
I was recruited.
But I think, I just can't tell you guys how proud I am of both of you and what you've done. As you get older, that's what makes life worth it.
Absolutely. Well,
So thank you.
I wanted to return the thanks that Patrick was mentioning the scholarship earlier. There are very, very few times in a person's life where you get compensated for self-improvement and spending time with friends, and that was a really unique experience. So we're really grateful for that.
Yeah. We may have to use
That's a
that
good
as a marketing
tagline.
program.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Blythe and
Thank you
Patrick.
both.
You guys.
Now I think we have about 12 minutes, maybe 11 and a half minutes for Q&A from the audience.
This is the danger time.
This is the danger time. We've got Julie Olson and Amanda Hughes out there with microphones to go around. They're the co-facilitators of the Brenneman series. So if you have a question, just raise your hand and they'll find you. We can't see very well up here. Any questions from the audience? Here we go.
Craig, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you.
It's been 45 years. My name's Ron Swear, and I was graduating about the time you were walking in the door.
Yeah, I remember Ron, yeah.
And I purchased your book, and I've actually followed your career. Okay, so if you've ever felt some sense back there, I have done that because you've been so successful, and I thank you both for all the contributions that you've made at Washburn and all the students and faculty and just generally everybody. The question I have for you has to do with your eulogy virtues. And I'm curious. I get real curious. I ask questions. I think you'll find most people know. I do that. What is your most significant eulogy really key virtue that you have at this very point?
Yeah, it's a great question. It really is the impact on other people. And I mean, you've seen that in Blythe and Patrick, and just seeing that sort of impact that you can have, whether it's employees at the companies you are with, whether it's students here at Washburn. It really is. I think at the very, very end, it's how did you touch somebody's life? And for me, if you ask my number one, it's my grandkids. So once you have grandkids, and Ron, you can appreciate this. The kids fade away a little bit, And my kids and Ronda too look at me and say, "Dad, you were never like this with us."
Yeah, we don't know that.
And so I tell them, "Do you know why grandparents and grandkids get along so well?" And they say, "No, why?" I said, "It's because they have a common enemy." But it really is across the spectrum. It really is how can you impact others, and what do you give back to other people? Because at the end of the day, I think that's all we're going to remember, and it's those relationships. And so that would be the very top of the list for me. I don't know if you want to answer.
I mean, I could say it in a different way, but there's so much value that we have together and how we can give beyond ourselves. So I would have to ditto the same.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sean.
Okay, here we go, back here.
Do the kids use the lecture system?
Our children or our grandchildren?
What did your children use it on for your grandchildren?
Actually, so one of the first evidences of that, so our our oldest grandchild is just 6, but she had received a birthday gift, and it was monetary. It was last year, I think it was. And so, I wasn't there, but the story goes that, she received the money, and then the son went, "Okay, you gotta give some money here because we gotta take it to church." And of course, that little 5-year-old is like, "I just got it." So there is evidence of it coming, yes. Their ages is probably a little young for the actual ledger, but I think ours were more closer to like mid-elementary and junior high. But I would say yes, he will be utilizing it.
It just creates so many great family stories.
Yeah, now we can laugh. I mean, we go back and laugh and laugh and laugh.
That's the question. Got a table of alpha notes there. I know they've got one.
Okay, I'll tell you another ledger story.
Okay, there we go.
So we are trying to sell a Suburban. A Suburban has a big front engine, okay? I'm trying to sell it. And people come and look at your car and they don't see any marring on it. And 2 kids, one child was on top of that engine and the other child, not knowing the child had something in his pocket, grabbed his legs and pulled him across that engine. What happened? He keyed my engine. Somebody's coming to buy my car and I'm like, "That's fine. The value just dropped $500. They each took out their ledgers. I don't know. They were probably 7th, 5th grade. Opened those ledgers up. -250. They didn't have that much money to begin with. -250. Everything in life costs something. Okay. They quickly learn. I mean, that's called hard edge parenting, right? So cost of living. They turned out okay.
There we go. Tim Durst.
Oh, Tim.
You can't serve up the AD table with that.
You're a professional question asker, so.
Yeah,
That's
and
good.
this will bring a smile to Greg's face, I suspect. Inmates running the asylum.
Yeah.
So we lived through a little bit of that at the fraternity house and otherwise.
That's a good description.
And it is indeed. It'd be great if you maybe expanded on that a little bit, including words of wisdom of some of those lessons we were grappling with when we were in college at Washburn, and how that's impacted you and the philosophy.
Yeah,
which
no,
I think
thanks.
is one of the-
Tim and I were roommates in college, so it's always great to see him. Inmates run the asylum. I kind of, as time went on, I got in a little trouble for that because that became one of those non-kosher things to say.
Yeah.
But what it really was empower people, give them the tools, and I've got a bunch of examples of that. Maybe the best one is from the airline, right? And I got a few of those, but when I went to the ticket counter and I was talking to the ticket agents, and they were saying, I overheard a couple customer conversations, and they were saying, I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't do this, I can't do that. And they really weren't serving the customers at all. And they were taking a lot of flack too. They were getting beat up, even worse, and from the customers. And so I said, where did you get all those rules? And they said, well, there's a thou shalt not book here, right? And what had happened over time at the airline, every time the management thought that a ticket counter agent made a mistake, they wrote a rule about it. You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this. So I said, show me that book, where is that thing? And they pulled it out, and it was a binder about this thick, right, of thou shalt not rules. So I actually called the maintenance department, and I said, bring me a 55-gallon drum and a gallon of kerosene, and take it to the top of the parking lot. And you couldn't do this today, you're in trouble. But I took all the agents up there, and I had them throw that book in the 55-gallon drum, pull a gallon of kerosene on it, and lit it on fire. And I said, let's sit down, and we came up with 2 pages laminated front and back. But kind of here are the general rules, and other than that, just take care of the customer. I then put in place this little tracking system that would electronically kick out, like if somebody upgraded somebody 17 times in a row, I knew their family was going on vacation.
Yeah.
And I could go in and say, hey, that doesn't quite work. And, if I got a call from a gate agent or a ticket counter agent, she said, hey, your cousin's here at the counter and they're demanding to be upgraded to first class. I said, none of my cousins would be asking to be upgraded.
Or your
to
best
first
friend
class.
was there a lot too.
So I get a lot of those calls, those calls, people just making stuff up. But that simple thing just reverberated through the airline, and we said the same thing to the captains, right? If you're ready to go and there are 2 people missing and they're going to be another half an hour, close the door and go if you want, right? You it's a captain's airline, you kind of make the call. So it was really about just taking those decisions and turning them down. And my best example of that at the airline was, I got this call in the middle of the night. When your phone rings in the middle of the night when you're running an airline, that is a terrible thing, right? But it was this customer, and I have no idea how he got my number, but he called and said, I was in Newark tonight, and I was supposed to go to Greenville, and they were reducing the number of flights, so I had to stop in Greensboro before I got to Greenville, and it wasn't right, yada, yada, yada. So let me take a look at it. So I went down to system control at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I said, hey, can you explain to me what went on last night? And so Greg, a big thunderstorm came through Newark. We had to increase the separations between planes, so we had to kind of reduce the number of airplanes in the sky. And we had to decide how we got people home. And so for a few of these flights that didn't have a lot of people on, in order to, because we couldn't send as many planes out, we actually combined the flights and sent them home. And I thought that sounded like a really good answer. And then he looks at me and he says, do you want me to call you in the middle of the night every time we make one of these decisions? And I said, absolutely not, right? You did the right thing, but it just goes to show you just empower people to do their whatever it is, their job. And I think we were pretty empowered in the AD house. There were a lot of good lessons in that house. And the scary thing is that house is still standing there. And so it probably is, I gotta think at some point a bulldozer might be the right way to get something in there that.
Or at least new carpets.
Yeah.
But it was a great learning experience to be there, and with so many great guys.
Okay, well, we are 1 minute before 3 o'clock. I think we're going to stop now. We're going to take about a 15-minute intermission before the next phase of our afternoon, our announcement. So let's give Greg and Ronda a huge round of applause.